Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this online interview series, Brave New Life for a Brave New World. I'm Clarissa Finley, and I am here today with co-host Kate Furnish and our guest, Sandra Bershad. Sandra, we're so excited that you are here. Sandra is a visionary mentor and awakening catalyst, deeply devoted to empowering people in becoming intimate with the resonance of their highest truth and inner guidance. She's on a mission to create spaces of radical permission that invite individuals to tap into the full spectrum of their inner knowing, visions, gifts, and the specific genius they're meant to share. She has a master's degree in mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling psychology and dual bachelor's degrees in somatic psychology and psychology of health and healing. She's recognized for her intuitive gifts and psychic abilities. She has appeared on Anderson Cooper, Psychic Children, Their Sixth Sense, Good Morning America, and The Doctors, and now she's here on our show. We're so excited to have you, Sandra.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Hello and welcome. You know, you really talk about that radical permission for people to be themselves. And our premise through Brave New Life for a Brave New World is that when we are truly ourselves and expressing ourselves, we're fulfilled. You know, life can feel empty at times, but when it feels fulfilled, it feels rich and abundant and exciting and fulfilling. You know, you just feel full. And so tell us a little bit about what brought you to that conclusion, that that was really what you wanted to help people do, is express who they are and lean into shining their essence in the world.
That's a beautiful question and invitation. Thank you. Well, I would say what I most resonate with, just in terms of sharing around your question, is I started my journey very early on being, I shall say, incarnating on the planet, tapped into a specific type of awareness and being kind of tuned to the multidimensional. And I was born during a time when they were, and just, science and the medical communities were just kind of starting maybe to attune to the fact that people learned, differently or had different orientations to, being and moving through the world. And I was labeled very young with ADHD and several different diagnoses, like oppositional defiant disorder, which is kind of one of my favorite diagnoses. It's because it's like, well, don't tell me what to do or how to be, which so I would say that my sense of being an advocate for radical permission, and I'm sure my parents would agree with me, started very young. And really kind of, even as a child, wanting to dance to the beat of my own drum, and then bumping up against kind of social conditioning and labels, or even being medicated for being and learning differently and perceiving the world in a different way, which was a really profound wound, feeling misunderstood on this deep level and feeling like I wasn't accepted for who I was, and not having anyone in the kind of in my immediacy that could really attune to me on the level that I really desired to be attuned to. Not that I could articulate that as a child necessarily, but there was a specific maybe way that I wanted other people to be able to show up in presence and to feel seen and connected to on a deeper level that wasn't necessarily available. And my parents are great. They did, an amazing job, and simultaneously weren't necessarily expecting having a child that was wired into the multidimensional, or maybe an alien, like they like to call me sometimes, from another planet. I'm like, she's definitely must be from another planet, because she's not like anyone else's, kids that we know. So I think that this desire to help people move into a deep space of radical permission and celebration for all that they are came from that place of feeling drastically misunderstood and not having the resources, even kind of, therapeutically. The therapist that I went to see didn't really know how to meet or orient to me. And I went to a, specialized school for kids with learning disabilities that you had to have a certain IQ to get, I was very intelligent, smart, but learned differently and perceived the world in a different way. And even there wasn't an exact understanding of how to help me integrate into the world with a vaster and wider perspective and a way of looking at things. And so I think I was seeded with this mission very, very early on,
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because that is a big wound as kids, when you just don't feel like you fit in, or you crave people to have the conversations at the deeper level that you're seeing, and it's not there. And you can feel like there's something wrong with you, or why am I different? Yet you have that strong sense that you're telling us of, you were listening to the beat of your own drum, and you were following that, and so strongly wired in that. And so it sounds like you've also found a way to really honor that in yourself and call that forward in others. And I think more people are talking about multidimensionality and intuition and abilities that maybe weren't talked about 20 years ago. And does that give you some relief and feel good that now people are having those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like I was a pioneer, as many of us are. We're trailblazers, and a lot of us that choose to walk on our own pathways are pioneers, or we're the ones that are going to get the lashback and, feedback from the collective for kind of going against the collective herd, so to say. And I think, a lot of us that pursue this path of being in service to other people are wired into the multidimensional. It's why we are so gifted, because we're able to access and hold so many lenses and dimensions of experience at once. Now, the challenge with that is that it can be really, really overwhelming. And so many of us, I'm sure that you ladies can, also agree with this, might have struggled with that. And, in my own personal journey, I struggled with that, having the kind of language to articulate what I was experiencing and feeling and sensing, so much at the same time, that it felt very, very isolating. And I think that now it feels very commonplace for people to talk about multidimensionality and psychic abilities, and there's so much more information and support for navigating so many of these dimensions and lenses of experience. So I feel heartened that is the case now, and also honored to be able to add to the collective tapestry in that way, to create accessibility to different support systems that really empower that integration, that kind of multidimensional integration and understanding of who we are as whole beings, just even beyond our human self, but also deeply and intimately understanding our human self from the psychology and the science and the subtle energetics and the majesty of our creative brilliance and innate genius, and how we can make that more accessible to others, by being more of ourselves and allowing others to really experience us.
Yeah. Well, you see the depth of a human being. When you're talking, I can feel some people going, I'm not all that. And yeah, you are all that. And
yeah.
yeah, how do we call that forth in other people? And I know your background, you've studied it from many different angles, so that you've developed an ability to talk about it and support people through that. And it's not that you have to have those abilities and see those things to work with Sandy either. It's just she sees from a variety of perspectives. And we've been talking about creating this brave new life starts by getting to know yourself. and getting to know the different facets of yourself. So what would be one place people could start if they feel, we'll take the whole spectrum, right? So we'll start with someone that feels really disconnected from themselves. What's a place they can start to connect into their heart and who they are?
It's a great question. And I always start with the body. You know, when I'm feeling disconnected from myself or confused about what I'm wanting or needing or about my direction or who I am on any level, our bodies are a tremendous repository for immediate feedback that are tuned to our unique frequency and vibration. And when we actually take this time and space to slow down and listen and attune to ourselves on a deeper level, we can begin to actually open into communication with our inner ecosystem and inner landscapes. And so I always encourage people to really start with that place of slowing down, moving at a pace that you actually feel you can connect with yourself and feel yourself in connection with yourself, and tracking any sensations that are physically happening for you, for that, because that's the gateway into the deeper layers of our unconscious and self. And something that I always love suggesting when, you know, someone's like, I don't know who I am, or I'm feeling confused, is to move through like a embodied awareness process of feeling the differentiation between what contraction and expansion feels like in our bodies, because that's just like such a fast and easy way to kind of connect with our innate truth in any given moment. And I usually associate contraction with kind of like a no, or I'm not sure, and an expansion with a yes, and like I'm ready to kind of like lean in and make greater contact with that. And you know, so a contraction for me is sitting in traffic on a highway and like, ugh, you know, like my body starts to kind of like go like this, or you know, and there's this immediate kind of feedback of what's happening. You know, I get more tense. I can feel a tightness in my jaw when that happens, even when I think of that, because our brains can't differentiate between a physical, you know, or emotional experience in terms of the reality of it. They're both real. So, and an expansion is, I'm laying on, you know, the beach, and it's a perfect, you know, 80 degrees, and there's a cool ocean breeze, and the water's 75, and even just thinking of that, I feel more relaxed and open and expansive. So if you track that for yourself throughout the day, that can be a really potent way to kind of differentiate your own sense of truth from other people's.
Yeah, what opens you up, because it's not always the same for everybody. And then that's the direction that you want to move in, where it feels more expansive. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I always, you know, I was writing like a whole piece about this, about individuation and differentiation, because, you know, a lot of people that I work with have a hard time differentiating between their own experience and other people's. And how do I find the resonance of my truth? And what does that feel like? And how can I create a container for myself and the infrastructure internally that I need so that I can show up in my high sense of alignment? You know, whether that means, you know, I'm, you know, just operating through the world like as a parent, or like at work, or I'm in service to some, you know, visionary project. We're all showing up in service. So what's going to support us in creating the infrastructure that continuously feeds our own sense of internal ground and deep connection and anchor to our deepest sense of self and highest sense of alignment and truth? And that's what I'm, you know, continuously trying to advocate for and kind of support others and contacting and creating within themselves.
A great description of what we've been maybe calling self-care on this series, but taking it, you know, amplified to what is that infrastructure that you need to create for yourself to really support who you are. Because self-care is not just body care, it's soul care. I mean, that's what we've been talking about. And so give us some ideas of what is part of that infrastructure, from environment to relationships to just how you connect with yourself each day. Can you give us 2 or 3 pieces of examples of what an infrastructure is like that?
Sure. Well, I'm of the mindset that everyone has their kind of exact recipe or ingredient list for their most optimal well-being. So it's like in my recipe, it's like I have a little dash of like meditative practice in the morning, mixed in with 10 to 20 minutes of writing, and making sure that I get some physical movement or embodied connection on a daily basis. And it's really just attuning to the practices that support you and feeling most deeply connected to yourself and sense of source. So I would say that that's like a self-care recipe. It's kind of tracking on a daily basis, okay, well, what are the things that support me in feeling expanded and connected to myself? Where do I feel that sense of expansion? What activities or things that I do create that sense, for me? And then attuning and weaving those in for yourself on a daily basis. And even I give this as an assignment to some clients to kind of create a self-care inventory, and then feel into which things on that list actually feel most in alignment for them, and then to select a couple of them. You don't need to do all of them, but just do one on a daily basis, and then start with 2, because I've made the mistake many times before when I'm like, all right, I want to make a big change, so I'm going to do it all now, and then it doesn't happen. So I usually encourage people to start slowly and really move at the exact pace that feels good for them. And that's another part of this piece. I've found that we are often moving far faster than allows us to stay in connection with ourselves. So it's really learning to attune to our own sense of internal pacing and getting wired into the communication of how our nervous system operates. Like, when are we activated? Like, when are we like not breathing and our senses are dilated and we're in that kind of fight or flight or stress response? So it's this kind of development of our capacity to somatically track what's happening for us, to attune to our inner ecosystem. And through that attunement, we are able to move into a more profound state of what's actually in alignment. And then through that, we can then embody the architecture that we've created internally. So it's this process that I go through and take my clients through of attune, align, embody. And that's kind of I would say the perfect ingredient list. It's part of one of my upcoming programs that I'm developing, which is I would say the most kind of potent process if you're looking for that, specific ingredient list and wanting to kind of show up in your highest expression of service. This is the kind of formula that I found to be most effective.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense as you're saying it and you're feeling it. It's not that you're never activated too. I appreciate you saying that. Like, sometimes you do activate that sympathetic nervous system, that flight or fright, but it's how can you recognize it? I was listening to something last night and it was saying, if you're not really running from lava or a wildfire, I mean, there are people experiencing fires right now, it may not actually be life and death what you're facing right now, although all the changes and stress can feel like that. But in that moment, perhaps you could relax just a hair, that it's not really life and death. And that was very soothing to me. And what you're saying is, it's really about getting to know yourself too on a deep level. And think about the people that you love. You notice them, you give them attention and appreciation, right? And a lot of times we don't do that for ourselves or know how to appreciate the different facets of ourselves. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about self-acceptance, because sometimes we're choosing, oh, I like this piece, but not that one.
Yeah, it's funny because everything that we're talking about, I was writing about last night, and no surprises there because it's in the field. Yeah, I found that self-acceptance, in order to be willing to attune to ourselves, we need to have self-acceptance. We need to kind of learn to accept and turn towards a part of ourselves that we might have compartmentalized or tried to shame out of existence. And really the process of self-acceptance is a reclamation. And I was writing about this last night. Everyone's like, well, how do I find myself and my true path and purpose? It's about individuation. It's being able to kind of discern and have the sense of inner trust that you can walk your own pathway. And individuation is a process that starts happening when we're a child or a teenager, and into adulthood. And it's I would say, a continuous evolutionary process. The only thing with that is that, during our formative years, there's a lot of things that arise that we don't feel accepted for a large majority of the time. And that's kind of where our wounding exists. So I think a large reason of what the reason why that we find that it's challenging to find self-acceptance is because we're still kind of running the tapes from childhood, or like a traumatic or really deeply wounding experience that happened that hasn't fully processed through our system. And when that repeats enough in our system, then we start to feel frightened or terrified or anxious about individuating and claiming our whole selves and true selves, because these parts of ourselves weren't accepted when we were younger. So that pathway is towards, I would say, radical self-acceptance and embodying and of those qualities is the reclaiming of the parts that were lost during the specific woundings and traumatic experiences we've gone through, and reclaiming all of those aspects as our whole self, and attuning to those pieces of ourselves that we've had a hard time loving and accepting in the way that they never really received. And moving into this process of deeply reparenting, being the kind of attuned, loving, unconditionally accepting, guardian that we wish we had in those moments. And then I would say that if you can do that, then which is really, really hard and pretty much impossible without the support of someone else, because our wounds usually and always happen in relationship and need to be repaired in relationship. And that's what I found. We can do a lot of self-work on our own, but it's in relationship, and with relationship with a trustable therapist or mentor or healer or whoever you feel called to work with, that you can begin to radically transform and repattern a lot of the deep wounding, so that you can feel safe to move into that deeper embodiment and expression and acceptance of all these parts and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I was also thinking, as you were talking, what was coming to me, because you're talking about these deep wounds, and they're so important. And then there's just pieces of ourselves that we hide because they weren't accepted. So maybe we love them, we just don't share them because we're afraid how people are going to react. Like I remember being a little kid walking to school with my friends, and there was this one little tree trying to grow, and it was kind of struggling, but then it would have leaves or whatever, and I would go over and like pat it or give it a hug. My friends were like, "You're so weird."
That's sweet.
And as you were talking, that's what was coming to mind of, sometimes I'll still stand by a tree, but I don't do that in front of everybody. I have my closest trusted friends that I'll do that in front of. And I realize I hold back, and that is something that limits us from our greatness and our purpose and our service, when we don't. And that doesn't mean you have to share all of yourself with everybody. You can be safe and make safe choices. But that's sort of what came to mind, is what are about these parts of ourselves that we hide, that really, what if they could come out and be seen and be celebrated?
Yeah, well, I love that question. Like, what if they could? How would our lives change if we were not expending so much energy and trying to kind of hide or monitor these parts of ourselves that we were afraid of fully expressing and being seen? And I think that when we internalize negative feedback around those things early on, it's like we do learn to hold back, right? And I think it's that process of I was talking about this, it's like getting accurate reflection, being around other people that have the ability to accurately reflect and attune to us and provide an unconditionally accepting space for us to show up in the spectrum of all that we are, even if it's tree hugging or, whatever, like I like to roll around on the floor, and like dance, like I do it in public when obviously we are able to be in public, but it's like, I think it's giving myself permission, but also allowing myself to take the risk of letting myself be seen. Some people are going to not resonate with that. And what I would say to that, and something that's been really helpful to me, is this kind of lens of, well, another person's feedback or criticism says more about them than it does about me, right? So it says more about their own conditioning. And this is something that I've struggled with, like, well, how much, how woo-woo or multidimensional do I get? How much do I claim and own? And when I was a kid, I kind of went through a period of feeling overexposed because I claimed my gifts at a really young age and got all this exposure, and it was really, really overwhelming. And then I found like, wow, that was really overwhelming. I need to go back into hiding because not all of the kind of feedback that I got from that experience was positive. But I think that learning to be our own best advocate and being our own inner parent, and then having teachers and friends and colleagues that can actually provide us with that accurate reflection, and a community of supportive, trustable people can really support us in blooming in all the ways that we're destined and feel most alive to bloom in. And yeah, it's like I just I'm feeling kind of tender in this moment because like I know that feeling so well. And something that I like to do is, because usually when I'm scared or feeling like, shy about sharing myself, it's like this kind of young part of me that's like, well, are they going to like me? Like, what if they think I'm weird? And, so what would you say if your child was saying that, to you, or like a little girl, little sister, brother, little kid is like, I don't know if they're going to like me. What would you say to them? And could you talk to them in the way that you long to be talked to, in that moment? And that can really be helpful for me, for like stopping, slowing down, attuning to that part and piece of me that it's feeling scared, really being with them and connecting with them from a space of full presence, attunement, and love, and just welcoming their experience without trying to fix or change it, and then seeing what the impulse is then, seeing what's available and wanting to be shared from that place.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're saying. I mean, it's really about becoming whole through healing all of those little parts of ourselves. And when we can tune in and talk to ourselves like that little child, like you said, like we would talk to a little child, that's the process of healing. And the other thing that's coming up for me to share around this is, to every characteristic that we have, there's a lightness and a darkness, and that might be something that we maybe don't particularly love that we do, but if you can flip it and see the light, the lightness side of it. Like, for example, I was always told I was stubborn, and I am stubborn, and like maybe the dark side of that is sometimes I have a hard time letting go of things, or I have a hard time seeing things from another way. But it's also what makes me extremely persistent and determined and push through the things that I really am passionate about. So it's like, when you can look at some of those characteristics that you have about yourself that maybe you wish you want to fix or change, but then realize that they also serve a really beautiful purpose in your life, on a flip side, it kind of helps you start to accept all those pieces about yourself, because it's really not about fixing anything. It's just about, you know, like you keep using the word attuning, and I really like that, like attuning to what matters to you and what gets to come out, and how you can utilize all of the different pieces to your benefit and to the benefit of those around you.
I love that. Thank you. Beautiful reflection. Yeah, I resonate with that.
Yeah, it's golden to spend time together, and the wisdom that's being shared. I feel like I need to go back and listen. I want to go back and listen 2 or 3 or 4 times, because there's such depth in everything you're saying, Sandy, and the understanding of the process that people go through and that people can go through, and to come into this radical permission and acceptance to be yourself. And where you express that and how you embody that in the world is such an opportunity right now to know we have that permission as things are shifting, because out of the chaos we get to choose how we come out of that, and what pieces what we retain and what we release is exciting. So I'm going to invite you, Sandy, is there any last words that you'd like to share with our listeners in these times, about that radical permission, or about attuning to their essence?
It couldn't be a more important time to be in complete devotion to slowing down and moving at the exact pace that feels good for you, and recognize that the world has its own timeline and timing, and just because everyone else is moving at a different pace, or at the same pace, doesn't mean you have to go at that exact pace. And the more that we all devote ourselves to taking internal time to really deeply connect with ourselves and become intimate with all that we are, and operate from a deeper space of listening and attunement, then we empower ourselves to become our own inner guidance system. And we don't need anything else outside of ourselves to be whole and complete, because we already are whole and complete. And I think that the more that we can remember that and remind ourselves of that when we're feeling lost, the better, especially right now when there's so much chaos and turmoil and upheaval going on in the world. It couldn't be a more important time to create your own devotional inner sanctuary that's made up of the exact ingredients that support your highest sense of alignment and optimal well-being, because then you can shine the light and be of service to others that might be having a challenging time without losing your own sense of inner anchor and internal ground.
That sounds like freedom to me. And it sounds like so much more simple than trying to go out there and find the right information and read the right morning routine or whatever. It's already with you. It's already within you. And you just are playing with the ingredients that work the best. And, what Clarissa's saying, finding what's the light and the dark in each thing, and what are the gifts. And freedom and simplicity is something we could all use a good dose of. And I appreciate, Sandy, you say it so beautifully, and it's been hard-won wisdom and knowledge that you've spent years honing and developing through your own experience, through your studies, through your work with people. And I thank you for the gift and the light that you bring into the world, and all the dimensions of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been so lovely to be here with you, and I'm appreciating both of your energy and the message that you are both working to share, and the container that you're creating for everyone to really show up in all that they are and beautifully risk being all their true selves and sharing themselves with the world. So very much aligned with that message and appreciating the work that both of you are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us, Sandy. Thank you everyone for watching, and just soak all of this in and spend some time today with yourself, attuning to what you need in this moment. We'll be back again for more, so join us for tomorrow for more interviews, and bye for now.